Welcome to the podcast. It's the worst territory in the world. Personalities, history, and other stories. We know you're craving for more knowledge. Let the champions get their glory. It's the worst territory in the world.
Welcome, everybody. It is the best time of the week to talk about maybe perhaps the worst territory in the world. I am your host, Gabe, sitting here with Chris Goff. Chris is getting ready to be a jet setter as he heads to New Orleans, his favorite place on earth. And we're going to talk some wrestling before he does that. Chris, how you doing this week?
Oh, man, countdown has begun. I bought a kilt to wear down at this limo pub crawl for St. Patrick's Day we're doing. And I didn't want to be a poser, Gabe, because I know a lot of Scottish people out there are very big on their culture. Mm-hmm. And so I told my wife, I don't really want to be a poser with this. So I remembered that my in-laws had bought me the DNA test for the Ancestry.com. This is 12, 13 years ago. Right. So I'm I do not really care what I am because I'm just an American and I'm a mutt, whatever. But I went back to look at that, and I am actually 38% Scottish.
Are you really?
Yeah, so it was weird. So I'm not a poser at all. So then I started calling up all my Scottish friends and being like, hey, what percentage Scottish are you? Because these are the people that walk around with, this is my $1,000 kilt. And I got lineage back to the 1400s. And then, so then I was like, well, I'm 38%. Oh, I'm not that much. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, you're the poser.
Kilt.
Anyway, so I'm looking forward to it. New Orleans is a great town, and I like to get there several times a year.
Yeah. So your last name, is it Scottish, Goff?
I think McGoff is Scottish, and Goff is also a lot English too. So I'm not I've traced it back. I know what our tartan is. That's the design on the kilt.
Do you really?
Yeah, it's called McFarlane is the name of the tartan.
Nice. Okay.
And so I looked up some of this stuff because I was interested after I found this out. But
it is pretty cool.
In any event, there is a bar in New Orleans, Kansas City tie-in here, that is called Molly's at the Market. And it's close to the French Market there and the French Quarter. And it is owned, and it has been owned for over 50 years by a family from Kansas City. And their name is the Monahans. So One of the Monahan daughters, she's married. It's not her name anymore, but she comes to the winery often. And we talk all the time about, it was her father owned it. He passed away. But anyway, Molly's has always these cool, in New Orleans, there's always a million parades and stuff. So Molly's always has a very cool either Halloween and St. Patrick's Day parade and a pub crawl that you get on sort of in limousines, and you drive around. They drop you off to 5 or 6 places over the course of 6-7 hours. Now, the problem, Gabe, is I know you're not a drinker, but I like to drink hard alcohol when I'm in New Orleans. And my wife can drink wine all day and keep that nice, even buzz. But when I'm in New Orleans, I'm I want a hurricane, or I want absinthe, or I want something really stupid because, I don't get to do that because I have zero responsibilities there. And I don't know if I can keep that up from 9:30 to 4. So we'll see.
So absinthe, when I was a drinker, one of my favorite things to drink ever was absinthe. Really? Absolutely.
Because you like the black licorice flavor.
Well, no, I like the way it made me feel. And
hallucinatory.
Because it was a different drunk than your regular, hey, I'm hitting rum or whatever, I remember drinking absinthe with my brother, and I was ooh. I was Daddy like this.
Have you ever had it? So have you had it the proper way where they drip? You put it on the spoon with the sugar cube, light it on fire, drip the water on it. Oh man, it is that's the place to do it, New Orleans.
My brother and his wife actually used to run a cocktail blog, a very famous when blogging was the biggest thing ever. Sure. And they would get bottles of liquor sent to them by all these independent distributors that wanted them to review. So they used to go to cocktail conferences. So yeah, every time, cool. And their favorite place was New Orleans. Or New Orleans. So every time we did absinthe, it had to be the right way. You know what I mean? Bloop,
sure.
Bloop,
it's quite the thing.
It is. There was there's whole bars in Northern California where I used to live where their whole thing was absinthe. It was a thing out there. So
well, that absinthe for years,
was illegal
in America because it made people hallucinate, and they thought it was very dangerous. But it's since they started putting drinks with herb saint in it, which is sort of a knockoff absinthe, but absinthe is now flowing quite well. There's the Absinthe House down there, and our favorite bar down there is Fritzl's on Bourbon Street. So they know how to do it there, and that's the pageantry
That's
of
awesome.
it is part of the experience.
Yeah.
But I don't do that every time. I usually just have a really strong hurricane from my favorite bartender down there, and a couple of those, and you're good for like several hours.
Yeah. All right. Well, you know what we're good at talking about the worst territory in the world. And this week we have a great interview, Chris, that you conducted with Bob Geigel's daughter, which we'll get to in just a minute. But before we get to that, Chris, it is WrestleMania season here in the professional wrestling world. Me and you are not, I would describe us as not the most avid watchers of WWE or quite frankly any wrestling program. But today what I wanted to go over with you is the current match card for WrestleMania 39 in Hollywood, and tell me whether you either have an interest in it, maybe a match prediction, or what some of your just quick thoughts on it are. So are you ready, Chris? We're gonna go.
Let's go through this monumental card.
Okay. So obviously the match that everybody's going to be talking about is Roman Reigns versus Cody Rhodes. What do you think is going to be the outcome of that match, Goff? And do you think it has a potential to be the best match on the show, given that you don't know any of the other matches?
Well, I mean, just the potential of the actual the storyline build up to it, the sort of ascension of Cody when he comes back to WWE, the as we've discussed before, I don't really care so much about match quality in ring as I do sort of the emotion and the story and the build up between it. And Cody just by himself, without even being involved in the Roman Reigns story, because I know that came sort of late in the game, not really, but Cody Rhodes' return has been probably better than most people thought it would be. And I know he had an injury and that took him out for a long time, but what I mean is the actual reaction and the ascension of him to a top star has been better than I ever thought it would be, especially if you remember Cody Rhodes in his first run at WWE, which was a low to mid card guy. He was young. I mean, he was a good looking guy in good shape, but when he went to AEW, and I think it's sort of shown that most of the EVPs in all the EVPs in AEW are basically I don't know. They look like clowns over there for the most part. And they did their entire run. Like whether it was, Rhodes to the Top, Brandy's overacting, the Young Bucks and what they've done, and Kenny Omega and the video game that will never come out. There's a lot of stuff that has not really made them look good over there. So when he came over here, I was like very interested in how Cody was going to be taken in WWE, but they needed a Cody Rhodes, and it was the perfect timing for him because they are just devoid of some big time baby faces in WWE.
Right.
And he, based on his lineage, his name, and the way that he left and came back, I think it's great. The fact that he's taken on Roman Reigns is even better because Roman Reigns has held the fort down in WWE for years.
Perfect.
And I think that, the only logical thing, which is, pretty telegraphing, I think that Cody Rhodes should win. I don't know why he wouldn't at this point, especially knowing that Reigns is a part-time schedule and all that stuff. Let him have a break for a while because this bloodline thing has been great. But, I think it's about time to wrap that up and go a new direction with Cody. Where they're going to go, I'm not really 100% sure, but I think Cody needs to win.
So let me ask you this, and I totally agree with you. I think Cody's going to win. I think it's time for Roman to drop the belt. He has had one of the most incredible runs. I don't get bored when I do watch. I don't get bored watching Roman Reigns. Love the bloodline storyline. I think he's really come into his own since he's had Paul Heyman and has fully become a heel. But let me ask you this. Is Cody going to be cursed with the oh my God, we want this guy to be the champion. He's the champion, man. Because my concern is that Cody is going to, the ascension has been meteoric, right? And then when he gets the belt, is it going to be one of those things where it's like a fart in church, where it's just kind of like, yeah, we wanted him to win, and now it's just like, all right, he's like a transitional champion maybe or something? Or do you think he has a potential to really be the top guy for a very long time in WWE?
So when you talk about sort of a fart in church, do you mean the night of or just the coming months?
Yeah, the coming months, after he wins.
Okay. I think he definitely has the potential, and I definitely think he has the, he is really, you know, turned a corner for me as far as like he is a top guy. Now you could debate that all. Is he a top guy because there's nobody else? Maybe you could say that. He's the best of what's left. It's like it's college basketball now that everyone goes to the NBA. It's like okay, this team's good because everyone else is not good. Cody to me is sort of like that in a way, but I think everyone in wrestling's that way right now. I mean, it would be sort of interesting. I'm not saying Roman Reigns wouldn't have fit right in the Attitude Era, but would he? I mean, it's always interesting. Would he be able to match up with the likes of Stone Cold and The Rock in their prime in
Right.
that era?
Right.
I don't know. Like, I mean, in this era, Brock Lesnar and him were obviously have been carrying the ball for a while now, but I don't know how Brock would end up being. He wasn't necessarily the man during the Attitude Era because he was too young.
Right.
Roman Reigns, I'm not sure. It's really hard, but Roman Reigns has definitely picked up the ball, though. Him and Brock have done great, and I think Cody can ascend to be a top guy and end up being, here's a problem, Gabe. You just have to have enough guys to throw at him that people care about. And
Right.
are they going to turn? Are they going to turn other people from the Bloodline storyline against him? Are they going to turn? Who's going to face him? Because yes, the ascension to winning the title is going to be huge if he wins at WrestleMania, but how it really pays off is going to be like, what's next? And that's what always is the question in wrestling, and who knows? But
yeah, absolutely. So let's lock it in. It's Cody Rhodes going home with the gold.
Definitely.
All right. SmackDown Women's Championship. Why do I laugh every time? Okay.
I don't know. I take this seriously.
Charlotte Flair versus Rhea Ripley.
Now, to me, I think it should be Rhea Ripley. I mean, like if you're making new stars and having them go to new heights, it should be Rhea Ripley. I mean, this lady has transformed herself big time since she came into NXT. I always like looking at the old pictures of her with like blonde hair, and she looks like just a sweet girl next door. And like what she's turned into now has been quite the transformation. And that's always, back when I was there, it was always like, hey, you need to, change your gear. You need to change your look. You need to stand out. And she has definitely done that. I like that. I will watch clips, and I do like I do like her sort of, the Dominic angle with her. I like all of that.
Yeah.
But I guess you could argue maybe it's not her time yet, but I think it is. I think it's time to. I think Charlotte can move to the side now, and I still think Charlotte's very good. But Rhea Ripley, it's time for some new blood in WrestleMania, and this is, to me, I think this is exciting from WWE as a standpoint of you have sort of a lot of
old
new
guard
stars
almost.
Yeah.
New
stars can be made.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I think I truly believe Rhea Ripley is the future of women's professional wrestling. I used to watch her back. I know you're going to hate this. I used to watch her back in Progress, like when I was a really big Progress mark. Progress. And I thought she was super talented then. I think it's her time. Charlotte, it can cut. She's one of those stars that can come in and out, and it really, she's always going to be a star. Charlotte Flair is one of the best women's wrestlers of all time. Like when it's all said and done, she's fantastic. So, next match is going to I got a lot to say. Well, not a lot, but the Raw Women's Championship, Bianca Belair takes on Asuka.
Okay, well, you start. What do you think about this?
I wish I could care. I think Bianca Belair is an amazing athlete, but I don't see the star power that everybody else does. My brother thinks she's an absolute star. I've never liked her matches. Again, mega athlete, super great as far as athleticism goes. Asuka, I think, again, I think her shine is kind of worn off a little bit. I just don't care about this match. I just don't.
Bianca has the look. She has the the ethnicity that they want to have for like somebody to take over that role of the non-Caucasian superstar of the women's division, because I think she has a lot of people to look up to her based on how she looks, and so I think it's like something that the WWE wants to capitalize on, because I watch her on Instagram. She like gets in. She was doing a bodybuilding competitions. She's like super ripped, in great shape. I do think like she doesn't necessarily have like the the intangible of sort of like the facials and
Right.
the sort of the emotion in the matches that she
Totally.
should at this point. I don't really know if that's something that she's going to get. That's sort of a hard thing to acquire over time. I mean, some people do, don't get me wrong, but I just that's the only thing I feel like she lacks. I think she's very good in the ring. I just think she doesn't really like, probably the reason why you don't care is that she doesn't make you care, because I don't really think she does the best job at showing emotion.
Right. Yeah. And there, I mean, again, because I don't watch, maybe I'm not like up to date on their feud, but I feel like this is just like, hey, let's put two really good workers in the ring
Sure.
and see what happens. Because again, there's going to be a language barrier. So it's like, how do you build a quote unquote storyline off of that? But I'm going to take full responsibility and say it's probably because I don't watch the product and the reason why I don't care. So, speaking of matches don't care about, the next match, Brock Lesnar taking on Omos. Get him, Chris.
Yeah, well, look, Omos is not exactly he's huge. I'm always a fan of the huge freaks. I am, but this is a weak build into this angle. I mean, Brock can go, but the thing about this that I'll give them credit on is Brock can wrestle anything, and it's entertaining from the Brock Lesnar standpoint. So, as WrestleMania season, as much as it is about making new stars and having these awesome moments of someone winning their first title or an emotional thing like that, WrestleMania is also about moments and like just some like sizzle, and this is a sizzle match. Brock can hopefully almost can take some of the things that Brock's going to throw his way, because Brock can probably throw him around more than anybody else that ever has touched Omos in his life. So I'm looking forward to the collision of the two. But like I said, I watched this for Brock, and Omos is just there. Maybe we can have a couple of fun moments with him beating up a very large man.
But here's the thing. Do you think they have enough belief in Omos? Because so let's make a prediction on this match. And real quick, Bianca or Asuka?
I think, gosh, man, I think I would like Bianca to win.
Okay, excellent. Me too. All right. But do you think now that Lesnar, because of the fact that he's he's a freak, do you think he actually gets Omos, or does Omos actually are they going to like strap the rocket on him and have him get a surprise victory over Brock Lesnar?
I hope to God they have Brock win. I mean, Omos should not be beating Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania. No. Even if you're trying to make Omos a star, this is not the time or place or the build or anything to do that. So hopefully Omos looks okay in the match and Brock makes him look okay. But good Lord. I mean, it just like Brock Lesnar beat Undertaker. He should not be losing to Omos. And I understand it's years later, but I mean, it doesn't matter. Brock Lesnar's a freak, so he should not lose.
Yeah, I totally agree. All right, next match that I am actually looking forward to, surprisingly, is Seth Rollins versus Logan Paul.
Dude, Logan Paul has come in and like lit the world on fire just in a very limited time. I got to be honest, I hate the Paul brothers from a standpoint of like they're so annoying, but that's what makes them entertaining too.
Yes,
they're these guys that have multiple Lamborghinis and mansions, and they make stupid videos online. So of course, for that reason, I can't stand them. But his athletic prowess from both the Paul boys have been amazing, whether it's fixed in boxing or not. But in wrestling, Logan Paul has stepped right in and done a great job. So I don't know what's going to happen in that match. You had to make me predict. I feel like you could beat Seth Rollins and Seth would be just fine. But I don't know. I think Logan should get the win just to help him out. I don't know the contractual obligations of Logan. I know he signed a year deal, I believe, but I don't know how many dates that is or how this can help them. But I do think that you have to sort of put Logan Paul over in this, and I don't think it'll hurt Seth. I really don't.
You know what? I'm gonna agree with you, and I'm gonna add on to that. The Paul brothers, oh my God, when they were first coming on the scene, so annoying. I was like, I can't stand these guys.
Oh yeah.
But here's what I can't stand even more is that Logan Paul is as good. He's way better than he has every right to be.
Sure.
I mean, he is a freak athlete, both in boxing and in professional wrestling. And he is like a natural pro wrestler. Yeah. And it is, if he really concentrated and focused his attention on professional wrestling, in my opinion, he has the potential to be one of the biggest stars in wrestling.
Now, obviously, you're right. he doesn't need to because he has plenty of money and doesn't
Yes.
have to. So
Yes.
to be fair to Logan Paul, I would never have a full-time schedule in wrestling
No.
because he makes too much money, and
Yeah.
why do that to yourself? But if you get super cool moments like to be in a WrestleMania match
Yeah.
or, other things overseas, he's been, headlining overseas matches. I just think he should do that. Most of these guys that are huge YouTube stars, most of them, there's two reasons you're a huge YouTube or social media star. You're either the first at doing it, which they were pretty early on,
Yep.
or you're a great promoter of yourself and an awesome marketer, and they're both. So I give them credit, and I think Logan Paul has been unbelievable in the ring, better than most wrestlers years into their career, if ever. And he could do that. But, when people talk about that, him going full time, why would you do it? He makes millions not beating up his body. Why would you do that? So,
yeah. And perfect dancing partner in Seth Rollins. But I will say, I do believe I'm going to vary with this on you. I think Seth should win. Okay. And I think so. I'm gonna predict that Seth Rollins goes over in this match.
Okay, we'll see.
All right, next match: Austin Theory versus John Cena. May I start?
Sure.
I think Austin Theory is great. He's got a great body. He's a great worker. But again, another one of those guys. He's missing that intangible quality that makes me go, this guy is going to be the next big thing. And I know everybody thinks he's going to be, and I do think he's going to beat John Cena, but I do not see the star trajectory that everybody else sees. End of story.
Yeah, I will agree with you somewhat. He is not, he's had a lot of start stops, to be fair. I think, whatever you want to believe in the backstage politics stuff, I guess he was one of Vince's projects, but then Vince left, and things changed multiple times for him over the last few years. But, when Ace was a trainer in NXT and WWE in general at the Performance Center, he said, he talked about how, looked at Austin Theory and said he had the factor of, being, I think it was because of his look, his age, right. He's still very young. I think Austin Theory will, if he stays in wrestling injury free, I think he'll be a huge star. He's a star now, but I think that he is so young, man, that that the problem with the lack of territories and the problem with the churning these guys out when they're 21 years old and then expecting them to act like a grown adult man when they're 23, 24 is not super fair, because I think Austin Theory will learn along the way, as everyone did, even John Cena back in the day when he first started, and he had years under his belt as an independent worker on the California stage. But I just think that you give Austin a few more years. So few people can step right into a ring like The Rock and become a stud when you're 23. But I do think he has to be John Cena at this point. Yeah. I think it's cool that John Cena came back for Mania. I know a lot of people wanted The Rock to come back, and maybe he'll make an appearance of some sort, but he's not going to be in a match, of course. But Cena is the next level of star that has come and gone and was a huge star, arguably the biggest star ever in WWE as far as money making. And I think it's great that he still takes time to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got nothing bad to say about John Cena. I was like many of the other marks. I am a mark, but I was like many of them back in the day. I was like, John Cena has 5 moves.
Yeah.
And it's it doesn't matter. He drew money. He was a career baby face. He has been, I would say, one of the most unselfish, quote unquote, workers I've seen that has the top of the card like that. He loves the business. He really truly loves the business. So
super confident, doesn't care what he really does. I mean, he wanted to turn heel. Obviously money wise, it was a dumb move for him or the company, but he wanted to change things up. I think he wanted to have some fun doing that, but they never did that. So but he ended up being the longest running babyface champion, by a mile. So, anyway, he's great.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, next match, Becky Lynch, Lita, and Trish Stratus taking on Damage Control.
Well, Damage Control to me is, I don't have a problem with them, really. They're young and, they're green. But, again, this is super veterans, 2 of the 3, taking on some girls that are still, they're green in the world of you're facing Lita and Trish. You're green, okay?
Yeah.
But I love bringing back people from that era. Lita and Trish are always going to be big stars to everyone that grew up through the Attitude Era, kid or an adult. And I don't know. You know what? This is a featured match for 6 girls, and I think it'll be great to
I
see.
do.
This is an attraction match at a WrestleMania card, much like we were talking about earlier with Brock and Omos, and I'm looking forward to it. It's something that I don't have a lot of expectation in, but that's okay because you'll just be fun and have fun watching it.
I totally agree. I'm actually looking forward to this match. I think the potential for Lita and Trish Stratus to quote unquote still be able to go, I think it's fully there. They keep themselves in great shape. Trish looks more, I don't know how, but Trish looks better now, in my opinion, than she did when she was working. She's aged gracefully. And I don't think, there's been a lot of snips and all that kind of stuff, but who knows? But I think she looks great. And I think there's a real potential for this match to be better than expectations would lead it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with everything you said. I think Trish still looks great. She looks like a grown woman now.
Right.
Like when she started, she looked like a little like young Barbie doll back in the day, sort of.
Right.
And now she's grown into like just a woman. And her and Lita, and just to see them in a ring ever and they can still go is fine. This is what WrestleMania to me is all about. You bring back stars from previous eras, get them involved. They don't have to go over necessarily. They don't have to look great, but give it to the fans that used to love it. They can still go. I love nostalgia. WrestleMania is all about that. So I'm in.
Nice. Me too. All right. Next match. Edge versus Finn Balor. I think it was recently announced in Hell in a Cell.
Hell in the Cell has been bastardized through the years. Sorry, I've said this to you before, but the greatest Hell in the Cell is Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, and everything's gone downhill since then. Mick Foley had the biggest pop moment, or the biggest unbelievable shocking moment of all time. Multiple shocking moments in that match, of course, but when the Hell in the Cell was Undertaker, Shawn, and the emergence of Kane, that was a perfect match, in my opinion, pretty much. Ever since then, you have to live up to not only that, but also the shock and awe of Mick Foley. So everything since then, whether it's Triple H, Mick Foley, and all the ones that have happened through the years, none of them, even the one where Rikishi fell off into the truck bed, these, none of them quite work up to that. And, I don't know. As much as I like Edge because he's another guy that's a throwback, this is not really a match that I'm super looking forward to. It's got a big gimmick attached to it, though, so that'll be somewhat exciting.
Here's the thing, though. Here's the thing. You cannot have, in my opinion, you cannot have a Hell in the Cell. You cannot have an I Quit match. You cannot have any of these matches and not have blood. I'm sorry, you can't. And like, especially with an ominous structure like Hell in the Cell, all this other kind of stuff, dude, I know you don't have to be John Moxley where you sneeze and blade yourself. I get it. I get it.
Every show. Yeah.
Every show. And it means nothing when you do, but come on, guys. Like, I get it. Your rating, all that kind of stuff. But I mean, matches like this demand blood to me. And I've seen Edge and Finn Balor. We've run this course before. Edge can still go. We all know that. Balor, I feel like Balor is a shadow. He's one of those great mid-card guys, but I don't care about any feud he engages in because it's just another feud for me.
Were you a huge Finn Balor fan, like when he first started on that? Remember it was Prince Devitt? Were you a huge fan of that? Oh, yeah. I remember a lot of people talking him up back then, and I didn't know who he was because I didn't watch Japanese wrestling. But he was. I know he's a huge star. Yep. To me, he is what you, I guess, think of Austin Theory. Like he's just sort of a guy that was super hyped, and he's in tremendous shape. Looks great, can wrestle well. Just has never done it for me emotionally.
Yep. Me neither. All right. And honestly, he was never that great emotionally, even in Japan, because Japanese wrestling is totally different. All right.
Yeah, Scotty Norton's over there, so I understand. Yes.
Who is?
Scott Norton was over there. All the people that are over in Japan are all the guys in the United States that didn't ever have any kind of emotional like connection, but they could go over there and look like just ass kickers over there. Yeah.
Well, from everyone's account, Scott Norton, nicest guy ever.
No, and I love watching his shoot interviews. I'm saying as a fan watching Scott Norton, he was like, man, he
wasn't moving you.
I used to watch his funniest thing for me was when I used to watch AWA Classics on ESPN. Him and John Nord tag teamed as like
the
the
Barbarian
Lumberjacks
Bird,
for like 2 weeks. I mean, it didn't last that long. They called him Flapjack Norton because he ate the most flapjacks when they were cutting down the logs. And dude, that was hilarious. But Scott Norton, WCW, was sort of like, man, this guy could probably whip the crap out of anybody here. But he was like a low to mid card. He was sort of like Hercules Hernandez to me. He's like, he looked huge. It looked like he'd kill you, but really didn't really have much of a connection to the fans. Yeah. And then he goes to Japan. He's a huge star. So go figure.
John Nord, what did they call him in WWE? The Berserker.
The Berserker, yeah.
Huss. Like doing the whole
Bruiser Brody.
Yeah. All right, next match. One I'm actually maybe possibly looking forward to the most is Gunther versus either Sheamus or Drew McIntyre for the Intercontinental Championship. Gunther and Sheamus had a hell. I think Gunther's a star. I do. I mean, I liked him. I tried to get him booked. I actually had a conversation with him when I was running Journey Pro when he was coming over here to the States, because when he was Walter, I wanted him in here bad. Really nice.
I know
guy.
You were a huge fan.
Huge fan.
I tried to book him. I think we were talking about booking him at NWL.
We were.
And the problem was he had like very limited dates and he couldn't really come when we needed him to. And I forget the cost was prohibitive just based on travel alone at that point. But anyway, yes, I know you love Walter Gunther. He has gotten in really good shape. And he is definitely he's ascending in WWE as well. So I look forward to the next like 10 years, hopefully, of Gunther in the WWF.
I really think that they should have died. The early rumor was it was Brock Lesnar versus him because they did the little tease at Royal Rumble. I thought that would have been the money match. That's a real match. That's something Lesnar could really sunk his teeth into. But the last time Sheamus and Gunther went at it was amazing. They beat the living piss out of each other, and they have the potential to do that. Now, I think Gunther is going to retain the Intercontinental Championship. But Sheamus, man, I've come to like Sheamus.
Sheamus has just been there way too long, dude. Like he does switch his stuff up. He's a very solid guy to have on the card, and you need those. Like the problem is like people don't understand, like, because they will say stuff on about Sheamus or the Dolph Zigglers. You need people like that because there's no jobbers anymore. They're basically star jobbers. Like they're huge stars. They will get involved with ascending people. I remember this years ago. They started trying to do this in the 90s, 2000s. I remember during Metro Pro, they were signing the likes of Trevor Murdoch, Dustin Rhodes. They were signing these guys to come back to be sort of what Dolph Ziggler and Sheamus are now, which are featured people, but helping them get over the younger guys. And I think that is a good match. If it was Brock and Gunther, the problem I have with Brock, dude, is that I just, much like Kurt Angle, it's very, when Kurt Angle did the Baron Corbin thing, like it's very hard for me to ever see anyone beating Brock Lesnar or really Kurt Angle, because I know that those guys are on a different level than anybody else ever in the history of the business in the last 50 years. So it's sort of like I would not have wanted Gunther to take on Brock right now, because Brock should not lose to Gunther either at this point, really, to be honest. Even though I know you're pushing him, but I'm saying just the legacy alone of Brock, to me at this point, should not even be questioned with Gunther, because even though Gunther's big, he is not Brock Lesnar. He's just not, never will be. So that's a really good, that's actually a really good point. I'm going to agree with you on that. It's not, I guess, as you said, it's not the time for Gunther to beat Lesnar yet. I think when maybe Baron Corbin's a Kansas City kid, and I like him. But it was very odd to have him and Kurt have that match. So maybe if Brock one day decides, in 10, 15 years, when he's like, I'm done making money at wrestling, maybe at that point you can put over somebody at that level. But Brock is just such a unique, special person in the history of the business, or sports in general, that it's just really hard for me to see anybody beating him, really.
I was watching some UFC clips of him the other day, and I was like, that guy's a freak. I don't understand.
He is. I mean, he almost made the Vikings with no football experience.
With no football experience, dude.
This guy can walk into any sporting thing and just take over. So he's a freak, dude. It's you can't beat him. But anyway, back to your point. Gunther should win easily.
Yeah. All right. The last match that's been confirmed, we have a bunch of matches that we won't go over right now because they're not confirmed yet, would be Dominic versus Rey Mysterio. Rey Mysterio just announced into the WWE class of 2023 Hall of Fame. I like Dominic Mysterio's character stuff, but match wise, he's just not there for me. I think if it were a time for him to have a coming out party match wise, I think this match is that time, but I just don't see it. I just don't see it there yet. But his character stuff is funny. He plays a good chicken shit heel. So we'll see how this one goes.
I agree with you. He's never going to be his dad, which is going to be really tough to ever like get anywhere near that. And of course, there's different size anyway, both of them. But you know, his dad was so special because of his size and what he could do. But you know, this is another cool attraction match. This is a throwback WrestleMania style, brother, you know, son versus father. I think it's I think I'm looking forward to the actual story of it. Like you said, Dominic has not really been super impressive in the ring, but you know that it is a huge priority, especially since he's going into the Hall of Fame the same weekend as well, that Ray has been working his ass off to make Dominic in this match perfect. You know, they have been going over this because like you said, he wants to pass the baton to his child. He wants to put him in the spotlight, make him look like a huge star. So I think they will be going through this so well that maybe it might surprise some people how well it goes off because of that, but because there is so much love and so much, you know, wanting to pass the baton and that. So I don't know. But this is a throwback match, and I enjoy the emotional connection because, man, they have had an emotional connection with Ray and Dominic since I was working there when he was a child, getting kidnapped by Eddie. So you know,
absolutely.
This is it's fun if you're a longtime fan. It's sort of fun to see people grow up like that.
I mean, and Ace made a post about Ray the other day, and I could not agree more. When I first saw Rey Mysterio in AAA, I mean, obviously in mid early 90s, and my mind is shattered. Just shattered. I was like, this guy is insane. And then he came up to ECW, and I was a huge ECW fan during that period. And they started mixing, you know, him, Psicosis and La Parka and Conan. They were all doing the hardcore lucha stuff in ECW. And I was like, oh my God, what I had that match on VHS, him versus Psicosis in a Mexican death match. Yeah. And I would watch that match. I can't even tell you. I probably wore the dang tape out. But it just blew my mind. So well deserved. The guy literally changed professional wrestling for small people.
And then they were able to put the mask back on him, which I don't know if has ever been done necessarily. Where a luchador loses a mask and then is able to put it back on after everyone saw him without the mask, and then is able to put another 20 years into have 20 plus years into having the mask back on. You know, what's funny, Gabe, is I've told you this before, that one reason that they put the mask back on him is because always the mask is one of the biggest sellers of all merchandise, of anything they sell. I remember back in the day, early 2000s, the top merchandise sales consistently were Rey Mysterio, Kane, and the Hurricanes masks. And you know, it's a good strategic marketing thing as well. But I'm glad that he's getting in because, like you said, he's been a game changer in wrestling.
And to this day, Eric Bischoff denies that he had some weird thing where he needed to unmask all the Mexican wrestlers and stuff. Bischoff's revisionist history is very interesting.
Yeah. I like Bischoff. I enjoy his tales. I find him to be a very fascinating person, his whole story of wrestling. But yeah, you know, I mean, a lot of people change stories from what you think, you know, but even stuff that he said and other people, they sort of, it's on video where things have changed. So, you know, I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah. Well, something that hasn't changed is look at these segues today. These stellar interviews that you keep conducting today, Chris. Tell us about the interview you have in store for all the people at home.
So after we had Rob Schamberger, the WWE artist from Kansas City that has been a friend of mine for over a decade now, after our interview, he's like, hey, and he hooked me up with two numbers of people that he thought would be good to talk to on here. The first one was JJ Dillon, who, if we're going to do that, Gabe, I need your schedule needs to align with me.
I do. I will make my schedule align with you.
But JJ Dillon, who was part of The Office in Kansas City in 1981, and I really didn't know that, but I guess according to his daughter Pam, he's like a huge fan of Kansas City and has a lot of great memories from that time. Oh, wow. But so you sort of go through his daughter to, you know, sort of set these things up. Okay. But the other interview that we are going to throw to in a minute here is the other person that Rob hooked me up with a lady named Chotts Dunkin, and her nickname is Shots, but everybody just her nickname is Shots. I believe her first name, she says, is Charlotta, but she goes by the nickname Shots, and she is the daughter, one of three daughters of longtime Kansas City promoter wrestler Bob Geigel. And of course, I definitely wanted to talk to her because getting this perspective of not only just thoughts on growing up in Kansas City and being there when her dad was basically running the entire territory with Harley Race and Pat O'Connor and everything she saw and witnessed, but also just what it was like growing up with Bob Geigel's dad. She talks about a lot of things. She talks about her house, because I was telling her the story of like going into her house, like her childhood home that her parents, I go, your parents lived there a long time, didn't she? She's like, yes. Like it was like basically since they moved to Kansas City in the 60s, you know? So they lived there till both, you know, her mom passed away in 2018, Vera. So they both lived there till their final days. So I said, when I get to go into his house, you know, I got to see his wall of fame of all these autographed pictures and everything. And like, he was so proud of it. And, you know, she talks about how difficult it was to have her parents pass away and have to do something with all those things that they had, because it's not like just a normal person that has a lot of knickknacks. I mean, he had a lot of like cool, interesting, historical wrestling stuff. But she does talk about a lot of fun stories. She was a big fan of Casey on the Mat. And she, you know, we talked about a lot of people that were on that documentary as well. But man, just to hear, you could tell the love of her father. And I'm sure, even though it's been almost 10 years since Bob Geigel passed away, she, you know, much like anybody, she still gets a little emotional, I think, about, you know, talking about her dad, who was such a lovable force in her life. But Chotts Dunkin, I appreciate her being on, and she was great.
Man, I seriously, I cannot wait to listen to this interview, because I love hearing the perspective of people that were on the peripheral, not like in-ring performers necessarily, but, you know, like someone like we had, you know, Dan Geyer on, who was like not a performer, but boy, he is as close as you can get.
Those people have the best stories.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So let's get to that interview with Chotts Dunkin. And that is Bob Geigel's daughter right now. And we'll see you on the other side.
It's the worst territory.
Well, I am joined now by the daughter of a Kansas City wrestling icon, a sports icon in Kansas City as well. Her name is Chotts Dunkin, and she is the daughter of Bob Geigel, who we all know here in Kansas City. Thanks for joining us, Chotts.
Thank you very much, Chris.
I was very happy to be introduced to you by our mutual friend, Rob Schamberger. What was funny is I had Rob on here a few weeks back, and he told the story of how we first met, because first time I really met your dad in a professional capacity was when I was doing this documentary called Casey on the Mat, talking about Kansas City wrestling history. And at the sort of premiere of that, which was at Memorial Hall, Rob Schamberger walks up with his girlfriend at the time and has this comic book he's illustrating that had, like, you know, pictures of your father from 8x10s I knew of, and, you know, he was illustrating it. And is that how you met Rob, through that comic book?
I met Rob in Las Vegas when he was doing pictures for the Cauliflower Alley Club reunion that they have every year. And I knew that he had married my good friend from college's daughter, Katie.
Yeah.
And he's a great guy.
So did he ever show you the artwork he did of your father?
Well, yes, I saw that one when he came up. Well, someone came to my mom and dad's home and gave him an award. Mm-hmm. Gosh, I have that here at my house. I have that award here at my house since he's passed away. And it had the picture that Rob had done of Dad.
Oh, that's cool.
Yes.
So when he gave me your information, and I thought I met, maybe you have two other sisters, and that's your only siblings, three daughters that Bob had?
Yep, three daughters.
Bob and Vera. I met your mother as well.
Yes.
So before I get into meeting them for the first time, I did want to ask, like, what is with the name Chotts? How did you get that name? Because it's a great name. Now I'm going to New Orleans this week, and it reminds me of fun times in New Orleans. But how did you get the name Chotts?
Well, my real name is Charlotta, and Dad came up with the name, and I always ask Mom and Dad, where did this name come from? And Mom said, your father came up with it. I don't know where it was, and he always called me Chotts or Shoots, and I don't know why, but that's what it's from. And it's spelled Chotts, but that's because nobody ever really told me how to spell it that I know of. So I just started writing Chotts.
So I have my last name is Goff, so no one ever says that, right? So I'm sure sometimes you get Chotts or something. I'm sure that happens.
Yep, I get a lot of things.
Oh, that's funny. So what was it? I mean, obviously my biggest question when meeting you is, what was it like growing up Geigel in Kansas City? I mean, how was it what were your first memories of your father and his business?
Well, we moved to Kansas City when I was 10, and from Amarillo, Texas. I was born in Amarillo, and he worked down there in Amarillo. Started out at Cal Farley's Boys Ranch, and then when he got into the business in Kansas City, we moved up there with him. It was a great life. There's a lot of good stories. A lot of good stories I probably can't or shouldn't tell, but here an example is we were walking downtown with Dad one day, my sister and I, sisters, and I think it was just one sister at the time, and a Kansas City bus stopped in the middle of the street in traffic. The bus driver opened the door and yelled out, "Bob Geigel, I know you." So he stopped traffic when he was downtown.
Well, were you a wrestling fan at all, or did you sort of because sometimes when kids grow up in this life, they either really take to it or sort of like, oh, that's my dad's job and I don't really love it or anything. What was your take on pro wrestling?
I loved it because, all the kids go, "Oh, your dad's Bob Geigel."
Sure.
So, he'd come to school, he'd come to the, different events that we had at school, and it was always, "Oh, Bob Geigel's here." And it was cool. I mean, it was really neat.
Did you go to the matches at Memorial Hall a lot? Were you there weekly? What was your schedule with that?
I didn't go when I was younger, I didn't go. When I got in, high school and after high school, when I was still in Kansas City, and then when I was in college, I'd come back in the summers, and I would go to the Memorial Hall, and we always sat in the same spot and up in the balcony. And when they say, I watched Casey on the Mat the other day again, and when they say that the first deck is like front row, it was right there.
That is such a cool building. It really is.
I love it.
That building, I know it wasn't necessarily, it was made for ring sports. I mean, it was the way it's shaped, the size of it. I can, I don't know, when was the last time you were actually at Memorial Hall?
I went for a country western concert after, I think was probably the last time I was there, and it was probably 25 or 30 years ago.
Yeah. When I ran a little independent promotion here, we had our very first show there, just out of the coolness of doing it. But the problem with that part of town is there's zero parking. It's like you're parking blocks away on streets and
on the street.
Yeah, and so that was sort of a deterrent for some people to go there, just for that reason. But it's such a cool building. I wish I could transplant it somewhere else.
That's for sure. It's beautiful. I was there for the infamous Bill Wilson incident.
Give me your perspective on that story, because when your dad told me that story, I was like, this is an unbelievable story. And after meeting your dad, and just his way of telling it was so nonchalantly, because that's how he was with everything to me, when I knew him anyway, it was such a great story.
It's so true. And Bill Wilson drove Murdy and Gertie Height around to the different towns. And when he died, he wanted to have his ashes spread at Memorial Hall on the floor. And Dad said, and Dad ended up with Bill Wilson. They brought him to him and said, here, this is what he wants. And Mike Springer, who was the manager of the Memorial Hall at the time, said, we can't do that. He'll just get swept up, and he'll be, people have ashes floating on him, and you just can't do that. So Dad left Mike Springer, Bill Wilson with Mike Springer at Memorial Hall. Well, pretty soon, Dad gets Bill Wilson back in, I think it was UPS or the mail or something. I don't know. So Mom said, he can't stay here any longer. He's got to go.
Yeah.
You need to do something good for this man, because, it's his ashes. So my sisters and I went over to Memorial Hall with Dad one day. And since they wouldn't let us spread him inside, we took him and we threw him out in the front where the grass is in there. And it was nice. We said a little prayer for Bill Wilson. And when when we went back after that, not long after that, you could see this green spot like it had been fertilized right where we had spread Bill Wilson.
Oh, wow.
So he was there, and that was where Bill Wilson wanted to be.
Oh, man.
And it was better than being swept up.
Oh, definitely. But you don't want to be on the wood floor. Yeah, that makes sense. The fertilizer is way better. You mentioned Murdy and Gertie Height, and every time, of course, on the show, I had to mention them because Harley, your dad, everyone. I mean, that's back when everyone was like a family in the first 3-4 rows, and everybody knew everybody. Maybe more than that, but definitely the first few rows. So what was your take on them? Because this was a time when today's wrestling fan wouldn't necessarily understand, but these ladies thought it was completely real because people weren't sort of smart to the business at that point, and they were two little old ladies that had a habit of sticking guys with hat pins.
Well, I had not heard of the hat pin thing until I heard Harley Race say it.
Yeah.
But I know they were always there, and they would bang their hands on the corner of the mat, and they would point at things and scream, and who knows what all was said or what was done at that, but they were great. They were great fans.
Did your dad have a relationship with them at all?
Well, not that I know of. I just know that he always, not that I know of.
Okay.
I wasn't around for that because I didn't go to the small towns that they all went to. I was up at St. Joe and on Saturday nights at KFEQ, and I think they were there then. You'd see the same fans most of the time you would go, especially right around the ring.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that they talk about that on the show, but just what a family atmosphere it was.
Yes.
And that's sort of how some independents are now. I ran a company for 6 years, and after a while, you knew the front row was always sold out first, and it was always the same people. And it was like a reunion every time you saw them. It was.
It was. You're right.
So that's you talk about St. Joe. Did you ever meet Gust Karras?
Oh, yes. I knew Gust, and I knew his family. Polly, I think, was his daughter, and he was a very nice man. He was very proper, but we had a good relationship with their family. I know after Gus passed away, we didn't see them often, but I saw Gus quite often.
Yeah, he has a very good reputation of not only being a sharp-dressed guy, but just beloved in that area.
Yes, with the hat and the cane. He always had his hat on.
Yeah, it was when people that I know that have met him, they say nothing but great things about Gus Karras, including Harley Race, which, of course, I want to get your opinion on with him because he was a business partner, an in-ring partner with your dad. He loved Gus Karras. He helped him save his leg.
Yes.
But what... Harley Race and your dad are definitely the two biggest names, I think I'm safe to say, in Kansas City wrestling history. After that, of course, you had Bulldog Bob Brown and the likes, and we can talk about some of those guys. But what were your impressions with Harley, and how close was he with your father?
They were close friends. The business was all involved in it too, but they were close friends. It's almost all those guys were kind of the same. I mean, they were a lot from small towns, and this was what they were interested in, was the business, and they were interested in it, and they were friends, and it was a handshake when they did business together. I remember Harley telling me one day, he goes, just stay in school. You've got to stay in school, and you've got to go to college, and you've got to finish all that and get that education behind you. And I'm going, well, why is Harley telling me this? But, as I was a young kid, I didn't think, yeah, sure, right, I'll go to school.
Sure.
And it was the right thing to do. I mean, they were smart people. They had a lot of good street smarts, and they were smart people.
Yeah, I told you before coming on here that this podcast is called The Worst Territory in the World because, we all love it, but Ric Flair, Jim Cornette, some of the bigger name guys that weren't from this area, and they looked at Kansas City as more of a secondary sort of territory. I guess when Ric Flair says things about your dad, and Ric Flair has sort of shown how he has been over the last 20 years of his career, sort of burning all kinds of bridges. But one thing he would say about your father was that, he always wore shower shoes, and he was basically too simple of a man. That's basically what I took it from Ric Flair's criticism of your dad. And after meeting your dad on multiple occasions, he seemed to be like just a completely down-to-earth, normal guy that was involved in this wacky world that sort of changed over the decades while he was in it, as far as more flamboyant and stuff like that. But what is your perception of someone else's thoughts about your dad like that?
Well, it kind of hurts a little bit, and I don't know. To me, he was a regular guy. It's hard to explain. It hurts when somebody says something like that, but at the same time, I'm fine with it. He was a regular kind of guy. He was from a small town. He had good values. He taught me a lot. It was a great life with my dad.
Well, I certainly, if I had to choose one of the two guys to hang out with as a normal person, it would definitely be Bob Geigel. So I don't take, he means it as a negative thing, criticism, but I feel like after meeting your dad, he just seemed like a completely normal Midwest guy. So, definitely. And when you compare it to someone like the opposite end of the spectrum, like Ric Flair, who lives his life, and usually in bankruptcy, it's usually not the exact same thing. But,
Right.
But your dad, I did want to talk about when I first met him. I was 16, and I went to the Woodlands with my grandfather, who started me down the path of, like, I guess, gambling that maybe should or shouldn't have done when I was 16 when that opened up. But when I went there, of course, it was amazing, because I was like, here's Bob Geigel, here's Bulldog Bob Brown, Rufus R. Jones, Mike George. Like, I mean, it was like, and they were all huge, and everyone knew them, and it was like they were basically, ambassadors of the city there, but they also worked. And what was that like when he transitioned into later in life, which he was there for decades, to go over to the Woodlands and just stay there till basically he was gone?
Yeah. Well, I think he enjoyed the Woodlands because he still had. He liked the notoriety. He liked people. And when people would come up, no matter who it was, no matter if he'd ever seen him before, he would always say, yeah, I remember you. I met you. And he'd shake their hand, and he'd treat them just like they were his best friend next door. And that's one, he enjoyed doing that. He was still out in front of people, and he enjoyed people remembering him positively.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was a line, especially when that place first opened. It was a line of people trying to see him. I mean, it was like such a cool thing in Kansas City to have that there. Anyway, when the Woodlands opened, it was awesome. But
he did take it very seriously, though. I mean, if there was a problem going on, he'd have that person, and he would escort them very quickly out the door if it needed to be done. And I heard stories about how it was done every once in a while. So,
I mean, I can only imagine that staff. I mean, if there's someone causing a problem, first of all, you're an idiot. Second of all, you're going to be taken care of quickly, I believe.
You were.
He basically, so for those not in Kansas City, the Woodlands, because I did a documentary on the Woodlands too, because as of only like 10 years ago, there were still a lot of people trying to get that place reopened, and basically now it's been torn down, and it's sad, but the river gambling boats came into town and sort of hurt that tremendously, and there's a whole political thing about that. But your dad, though, even though this place had not been open for, I don't know, 20 years, 30 years, I don't know, it's 20 years at least, I'd say, he was still there in that guard little shack outside, and until, I mean, basically he was almost 90, right? I mean, when did he actually stop going there?
Well, he that was really what led to when he passed away. He was working a midnight shift. It was 12-hour shift or something at night, and he fell down and broke his hip. And when he was at work at the Woodlands at the time, and it was a little guard shack that they were in, and he would go out and do his rounds and then come back. He fell down, broke his hip, ended up in the hospital to get that repaired, and never really never really got better after that. And, he died when he was 90. That was probably when he was 88 or so. He
Okay.
might have been 89 because it was close. He didn't live much longer after that. It was about 6 months after he broke his hip that he passed away.
I mean, amazing that he was still going to work at that time. I mean, I think it probably just gave him obviously purpose, which as I get older, I understand the thought of that.
Right.
But yeah.
I think some of the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department, sometimes when they would see him driving, he drove really slow when he got older, which, is kind of surprising, but it was in his pickup. And if a policeman's following him, he's going even slower, or he'd stop right in the middle of the road and people would go, "Oh, Dad, you can't just stop in the middle of the road." So he probably shouldn't have been driving that long as it was, but you could never tell him, "No, you can't do something."
Oh my gosh, yeah. And that topic in general is a very hard topic to broach with any family member, but I can only imagine a guy that drove so many miles in his life.
Yeah, it was a difficult time.
When I want to talk about some more personalities, like Bulldog Bob Brown is also synonymous with Kansas City, even though he's not from here, but around this area at all. He's a Canadian, but he was a tag partner with your dad, and he was known as quite the character. Do you have any good stories about him?
Quite the character. He used to come over for Thanksgiving dinner every year, and he never liked anything that was made in front of. There might have been one or two things, I can't remember what they are, but he would sit there and complain about everything. He might have liked the rolls or the biscuits, but everything else he'd just kind of turn his nose up at and say, "Nope, I don't like that. I don't like it." And he was the most obnoxious guy you've ever met, but we loved him to pieces. He was a great guy. He'd do anything for you. He was like a brother almost, but what a character.
Was that partially a character, or was that really him doing that with the knocking your parents' food?
To me, it was really him.
Maybe he was. I never got to meet him, really.
He and I used to spar back and forth, but when he passed away, it was one of the saddest things in the family. I remember his mom always made dill pickles, and there would be a huge jar, like a gallon jar of dill pickles that he would bring us, and we had pickles in the refrigerator all the time from Bob Brown's mom.
Oh, that's funny.
So he was a great guy.
What about Rufus R. Jones, another guy that is super tied to Kansas City, as were a lot of these territory guys, but he stayed here a long time, and he is also, everyone knows his personality as well.
Yeah, Dad had a lot of respect for Rufus, and they were good friends. I know Rufus and his wife had a restaurant, and it was, I'm thinking down off Truman Road or somewhere, because it seemed like we drove a long way to get there, and had chitlins and I can't even tell you all the food, but my dad loved the food at Rufus's restaurant, and he was a great guy.
Yeah, both those guys lost very early, really, in relative age. But I never got to meet him either. But he was, I've heard many stories. In fact, one of the guys that worked with me was looking into buying his house, like just a few years ago. Yeah, because I think his daughters still live there. But
really?
Yeah. So
I met his wife at the restaurant, but I never knew his kids.
Yeah. No, they stayed part of the community here, definitely.
Oh, that's great.
You mentioned his restaurant, but I got to mention your dad's bar, the Tender Trap. I had heard about this, and where was that located exactly? 3
West 12th.
Okay.
So it was on 12th Street, and he had that for. Well, my sister always says that's what sent us to college. That's what paid for our college, was the Tender Trap. But I spent my 21st birthday there. I went there for my 21st birthday. And it was just a fun place to go. It was dark. It had a jukebox, of course. He made money on the jukebox. On Christmas Eve, he always was the bartender. He would let the bartenders have Christmas Eve off. And he would always go there, and we were always waiting at home for Dad to come home so we could open presents. on Christmas Eve. But if somebody ordered some foo-foo drink and he didn't know how to make it, he would give them a beer. And if they complained, it didn't matter. That's what they got, because he didn't know how to make some of these things, and they got their beer. But it was a fun place. There were roaches in it sometimes, and on Sundays he would go in and he would spray the roaches, probably with stuff you're not supposed to use now to spray the roaches.
Yeah, of course.
But he would spray them. But the one thing I got from the Tender Trap, we always had the beer signs. The beer guys would bring in the beer signs,
Sure.
And there were signs all over. But when the Tender Trap closed, up in the attic, there were a bunch of old beer signs, and I got a Heineken one, and it's still here in my house today.
Oh, cool.
And it's precious because it's something that I got from the Tender Trap.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I'm very nostalgic about all that stuff, so that would be really cool to keep something like that.
Yep.
Wow. I guess just as his daughter though, how was Bob as a father? He seems like I met him later in life, and it seems like everyone seems very nice at that. When they're in their 70s plus, like they always seem like sweet people. But he just seemed like a great guy. He did.
I don't remember ever getting spanked. My sister said she got spanked, but I didn't ever get spanked. I remember one time we had a farm out in Umbarger, Texas, and because he was a farmer all of his life in around Algona, Iowa, and so they bought some land in Umbarger, Texas, and it was right next to Dory Funk's Flying Mare Ranch.
Oh wow!
And we would go out there, and I remember the windmill, and Dad always had to get up on the windmill to make it work, and then his back would hurt after that. But there was one time that we were walking across the whole farm from some fence he was building, and I couldn't walk it. I was just too little to walk this thing. And so he put me up on his shoulders, and I remember walking all the way across the farm with my hands around his head, and he carried me across the farm. It was good memories. I mean, that's the kind of thing you remember. He always had my sisters, well, he never had me do this, test to see if the electric fence was turned on. And they would touch it. You made me touch that. But
oh, yeah. I remember those days. I had some farmer friends, too. And it was, they'd be like, as boys, they'd be like, why don't you, try to go to the bathroom on that and see what happens? And that would always lead to real problems.
Well, we didn't ever have to worry about that. We were all girls. So we didn't have to. But
I have a feeling he may have done that.
He was a great dad. He was a great dad. We used to have headbutt contests. It's not where you hit your head, but you put your foreheads together, and you'd see who could push the other one far. And he always let me sometimes win. Or he wanted me to punch him in the stomach to see if it would hurt, and he'd pretend that he didn't feel anything. And of course he probably didn't. And I'd give him a bear hug and squeeze him, and he'd squeal like it was hurting, but it wasn't hurting.
I think I remember about your dad, even when he was in his 80s or so, he had really big hands. Like his hands were like, everybody talks about Andre the Giant's hands because he was a giant, but your dad had those big, like probably farmer hands. And that a lot of people like myself, I don't have those because I don't have like quite the work, that he had to do. But he was just a big guy. He had like big features. I mean, when you saw him, he was a mountain of a man, really. He was in great shape too.
Yep, he was. I never knew him when he had hair.
Really?
His head was always bald.
Oh, wow.
So that's one thing. When he got older and he was in the nursing home and his hair was growing, I was just like, wow, I didn't know you had hair.
It's sort of like what I think about with like Steve Martin and people like that. Like if you don't have hair that long, you never really age. You look like this. You look like the same age for like 40 years. Yeah.
Yep. He did. Yeah. And he was always so strong. Even when he got difficult when he got older and he was in the nursing home and the rehab place. And I would always say to the guys, the women or men that were there helping him, get out of bed or something, I'd say, be careful because he's really strong. And if he didn't like something, he would let them know. He'd grab their arm and say, "Don't touch me, don't lift me up." If something was hurting him, he was always real strong. And the guys would always say, "Yeah, we know he's strong."
Oh yeah, I can only imagine trying to be involved in that. If he didn't want to do something, I'm sure he wasn't going to let you do it easily or at all.
Oh no,
Oh,
right,
man.
right.
So, would you? When did you move away from Kansas City?
1993.
Okay. So I assume at that point, when I talked to your dad, so I wanted to tell you when I went to their house to interview him for that documentary, I forget who hooked me up with that actually, but I got to go to his house, and Rob Schamberger and I were talking about when you go there, your dad is very proud of his basement or like the downstairs where he had all those pictures on the wall.
Yeah.
He had all these autographed pictures, and I was honored to be able to go in there, and he was very. It was cool to take the tour with your dad of like all his memories and stuff like that on his wall.
He was very proud of the wall.
Oh yeah. So what is that? The house you grew up in?
Yes.
Because let me tell you something. When I went in there and I saw like their house, my grandparents have lived, and my grandma's still alive, and she lives in the same house that they have lived in for 60 years. And it reminded me so much of Bob Geigel's house. Reminded me of my grandparents' house because you can tell, going back to like not some crazy spending guy, even though here he is, the NWA president and a promoter and wrestler. He's not some guy that's going to go buy some mansion somewhere and go broke. Right. He had this house probably for decades, and him and your mother Vera were like they were together for so long. Like I read, was it 65 years?
At least that. I remember having the party. Well, we had a memorial, not a memorial. We had a celebration for their 60th, I think. It was even more than that.
Wow.
And we sent out for people who couldn't come, people they went to college with, people who like Joe Scarpello and his wife, and people that he played football with in college. We sent out invitations to it, but if they couldn't come, we said, please send back congratulations to Bob and Vera for their anniversary.
Sure.
And got back the nicest things from the friends that they had for all their lives. I know we moved to Kansas City in 1965, so they lived there in 65 until he passed away in 2014. So that was their house. And then Mom, we kept the house until Mom passed away in 2018. And that's when we cleaned it out. And oh my gosh, it was so hard for my sisters and I to do that.
Oh yeah.
Because what do you throw away from a lifetime of that many years? It was hard to do.
Oh, I mean,
it was very hard.
I mean, that's something that no one looks forward to having to do, period. But like your dad had so much historical stuff, and you could tell he kept a lot of things from that era. Yeah. And I mean, he was very proud of that stuff, and it was really cool to go there. And I met your mom, and she seemed like a great lady, and like a great compliment to him.
She put up with a lot.
Oh my gosh.
She put up with a lot from my dad.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, what was your mom's life like? Because I'm sure he was gone, considerable amount of time just based on the kind of work it was. So I mean, she probably was raising the kids a lot of the time.
Yep, she was. Her outlet, she would play bridge once a week with the bridge ladies in the bridge club, and you could not stop her from going to her bridge club. That was. She loved that, but she would come to all the high school things, all the grade school things, and go to the basketball games from the high school. And she was a big sports fan. She loved the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, both Mom and Dad were very big sports fans things. And she followed him in college when he was playing football at Iowa. And so she was a wonderful mother to have. And really, I never got spanked by either one of them.
Were you just a good girl, or were they just not? They weren't disciplinarians at all.
They were disciplinarians, but they just raised us so that we didn't do bad things. I didn't do bad things in high school, and I think my sister drank some beer every once in a while. We did have a keg, a refrigerator tapper downstairs in the den where you probably saw when you were down there. And it was there. We never went and drank beer. I got to drink the foam off of his beer because you used to have foam on the top of a glass of beer.
Sure.
And he let me have the foam. But we never wanted to do that. We'd have some swimming parties. Dad always had fun swimming parties. That's one thing that he did. I remember a time that Lord Alfred Hayes was there for the party.
Oh, yeah.
Pat O'Connor, Omar Atlas and his family. Bill Kirsten usually came for things. Gosh, who else? I don't remember Tom Andrews being there at the time yet. Richard Moody, the referee,
yes.
He would be there every once in a while. His family and ours were pretty close. He lived down in Grandview, so we had to go pretty far to see him. Harley Race would come, but it was always fun having the parties. Probably drove the neighbors crazy, but
oh, sure, I'm sure. Like, this is back when they were, they were living modestly. They're not.
Oh, yeah.
It's not like you hear of these people today. You were just part of the community, like a normal person.
Right.
I don't think I ever heard this, but I know he was a football star at Iowa. So did he have an injury that made him go into pro wrestling, or did he decide that there's just a better business decision? Why didn't he pursue football more?
Well, he was offered. I think he always told me $5,000 a year or $4,000 to play. I thought it was the Chicago Bears at the time. That's what I'm remembering. It was the Chicago Bears, and they offered him $5,000 to play there. But there was a man named Babe Bizignano. It was his restaurant in Des Moines was called Babe's.
Okay,
and it was there for years and years after that. And Babe told him, you'll make more money if you get into wrestling. I don't know what Babe's connection with wrestling was at the time, but he kind of got Dad into wrestling and said you can make more money doing that. So, Dad was pretty easy going. He was a farm boy. If somebody told him he could make more money doing something, he would do it. And he did. So that's how he got into it. As far as I remember.
No, that sounds right. I saw that he was trained by a guy named Alphonse Bizignano. So yeah, that must have been Babe. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of those situations where if he was as because he's such a big imposing guy, if he would have come around now, of course he'd be making millions in the NFL. But back then, the NFL was like a part-time job. So that was just a sign of the times, I guess.
We have pictures. You probably saw a couple on the wall downstairs. But if you saw the helmets that they wore at the time, I am not surprised that somebody like him and Vern Gagne, who also had some dementia issues.
Oh, yeah.
That I'm not surprised that it wasn't from their football injuries that they got in college. Dad played offense and defense. He played the full 60 minutes of the game. And so they had to have had head injuries at the time.
Oh my gosh. So. Yeah, I saw. So he signed several 8x10s for me through the years. And most of them was the one where it was just sort of like from his waist up, and he was black tights, shirt off, and he had a smile, and that was his normal one. But I saw the ones that he would also sign where he would have in a sort of a 3-point stance at Iowa, and he was wearing that helmet you're talking about. And they were basically like a leather cap. That's it.
It was.
Yeah.
And he always told my husband, you're never going to find a nice football player. They might look like they're nice when they're out and about, but when they're playing football, they're all mean and they're all trying to do the same thing, get that football. And there was one time he played, I think it was against Boston College when he was in college at the University of Iowa, and they were in Boston, they played, and it was about 2 or 3 minutes into the game, and the coach said, Geigel, why aren't you in there? Get in there. And Dad said, I can't. They kicked me out of the game. I hit a guy. So I guess he punched him because I don't know what it was, but the coach wasn't happy with him.
That's funny. Well, he seemed like a very mild-mannered guy, so it had to been pretty bad.
Yeah.
So I guess any other guys that came through Kansas City as wrestlers that we haven't touched on, or any other memories of the wrestling scene growing up that you think would be fun to hear about?
Well, Dad was really close with Dory Funk Sr. And I think they met each other at Cal Farley's Boys Ranch because Dory worked there before Dad went down there and worked. And so we were very close with Dunk and Terry. Dunk is Dory Funk Jr.
Okay.
And we were very close with Dunk and Terry. And we went out and stayed all night with Dorothy, Dory's first wife. And the girls, my mom and my two sisters, and I would go out and stay all night with Dorothy. She had a pet for a while. She had a pet skunk that she had depued. She called him Pepe Le Pew.
Of course.
But they had a swimming pool, and that's where we learned to swim, was out there at the Flying Mare Ranch. And my sister and I, last fall, we drove to Amarillo, and we saw Terry Funk. Went and saw him. He's in a memory care unit there. He had not changed. Looks wise, he's older, of course, but he had not changed a bit. He still had the stories to tell, and we took pictures and showed him, and he remembered everybody that we showed him. He was very fond of Dad. But and we also went and saw Dory Funk Jr. Dunk when he won some award at Cauliflower Alley about 5 years ago or so. I can't remember which award it was, but all three of the daughters, Sue, Mike, and I, went out to see Dunk when he won that award in Las Vegas. So we were really close with them, and they were good friends.
Oh,
and then Tom Andrews, of course, was a good friend. He and Dad they went to every year the Veterans Hospital, VFW, well, not VFW, but the Veterans Hospital, VA, in Kansas City. They would go there because every Valentine's Day, a lot of Kansas City sports figures would go to the VA and meet with the veterans there. So Dad was always there, and Tom Andrews would go, and Frank White. That's where Dad met Frank White. And Frank remembered Dad. I went to a Royals preseason spring training game.
Sure.
Once in Arizona. I think it was Arizona. It was a long time ago. And I said, "Mr. White, I'm Bob Geigel's daughter." And he said, "Oh, I know Bob. I used to go to the VA with him." So that's a kind of Bill Grigsby. His daughter was in my high school class. And since it was Grigsby Geigel, we always shared lockers when we were in junior high. So Ann Grigsby and I were friends because we were locker mates. But that's how I knew Bill Grigsby and his daughter.
Bill Grigsby, of course, he's passed on, but that guy, he had a story for everything. He was like the life of the party. When I interviewed him for that documentary, he had some great memories of because he went into it like a lot of guys did back then, sort of like he was an announcer and he wasn't like a super wrestling fan or anything, but he did it because he was a professional broadcaster, so he got involved.
Yeah, it was a job.
Yeah, and so he got involved, and he was super, him describing just the scenes, like on that show where he talks about the Sheik running down the street. I mean, he's telling this as if he's not part of the show. He's a fan watching it happen, and I'm sure your dad and him had some chuckles together.
I'm sure they did. Yep. And when streaking was going on, Dad had to have something with the streaking because that's what was going on at the time.
Of course.
So I think he told the story in Casey on the Mat. I'm not sure, but he had the streaker go, and Kirsten said, "I wish I could tell the story. Kirsten tells it better than I do." But
yeah. Well, he was known as a great storyteller because he would always add in, he's such a great ad-libber with just the environment, setting the scene, I should say, and talking about it.
And he did, yep.
When I did that, just to tell you, when I had worked for WWF, and I had moved back home to Kansas City and started working for that Metro Sports, it was called at the time. That cable station was all sports, and I had to sort of restart after Stephanie McMahon let me go. And so when I came back here, I was a sort of an intern, worked part-time, and then it got to the point to where I was producing a lot of shows with that channel. And I specifically was like, I really want to do a documentary on all the people still living here, because at the time, wrestling years are harder than normal years anyway, and they were all getting older. And I really wanted to honor and, in tribute in any way these guys that were such a huge part of a lot of our childhood. So, when I look at that now, which is, 13 years later, 14 years later, I mean, everyone on that show now is pretty much gone. Billy Howard is still here. I talk to him occasionally. Mike George still works at a casino. He's still, he does. He's still security guard.
Is he at Riverside?
He's at 7th Street Casino in Kansas City, Kansas.
Oh, okay.
And and he still gets up and at him at it, and I think that's cool. But I was happy to be able to do that, and I was so happy to get to know your dad and that, because he was such a really great guy, and I loved being around him. And you seem like a great guy yourself, so I'm sure it was basically because of your parents.
Yeah, I should have. I should come interview you, because you probably heard a lot of stories that I'd like to hear.
Well, I think like you, I probably can't tell some of them, because they're the greatest stories are never really told on camera or radio or anywhere. But
well, there were a few words that you let go on Casey on the Mat that I'm surprised, but it was my dad. He always says those words. So.
Yeah, well, maybe it didn't even resonate with me, because I use those words too, and it's just like saying a normal word. So I couldn't believe that, especially my boss at the time. I was sort of shocked that he did let some of the things fly, but the people there now would not. So I'm glad I got it in under the wire. So
my mom would always say, "Bob, quit swearing in front of the children."
Yeah. I haven't really been yelled at much by my wife yet, but I really try to temper that stuff bad. So, but he was a character, and I enjoyed it, and I really appreciate you taking time to talk. We've never met, but I'm really thankful that Rob hooked me up with you, and I'm glad that you gave me so many great memories of your dad.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
It's the worst territory.
All right, welcome back to the worst territory in the world. Fantastic interview, Goff, with Chotts Dunkin. Man, I just love hearing the stories from the people on the peripheral. It's so awesome.
Yeah, she was awesome enough, like you heard there, to take time out. She lives in Atlanta now, and she has lived in Atlanta for 30 plus years. So she is definitely has a lot of ties to Kansas City, as she talked about. She grew up next to the Funk farm, and she got to know all the Funks, Dory Sr. and Jr. and Terry, and just coming to Kansas City for 30 to 40 years of her life, and then moving on to Atlanta. She used to work for TWA, as she's talked about, which TWA used to be a hub here in Kansas City before it got bought by Delta. But anyway, she was awesome, and I really appreciate her taking out time to talk about her dad, because her dad will always be, him and Harley Race will always be so synonymous in Kansas City. And really, Bob more so, because not only did he promote and be a star here as a wrestler, but he worked at the Woodlands for, years and years until his death, which, everyone knew. That's Bob Geigel.
That's crazy. There's just so much. That's what I love about doing this podcast is just learning so much about a territory I had no idea about that, has such a rich history. So we've come to the final segment of this show, Chris, before I let you get on your plane off to New Orleans.
Oh yeah.
I figured we would do, usually I give you your menu and you select, but today, not so much. We're going to do one category and one category only, and that is the St. Patty's Day Brawl. So what I want you to do is, St. Patty's Day is coming up. You're wearing your kilt, which I wanted to ask you how much you spent on your kilt, but I'm not going
Very cheap. Very cheap.
Very cheap. But the alcohol is flowing. The temperature rises in the room, and tempers start to flare. So when that happens, we usually get a good old fashioned barroom brawl, right?
Sure.
So in your educated opinion, out of all the maybe backstage brawls and or parking lot brawls, what was your favorite wrestling brawl?
So you're talking shoot or work?
Oh, I didn't expect you to throw that one at me. Let's go ahead and go work.
Okay, because the shoot would probably be. There's so many. Paul Orndorff knocking out Vader with his like the
Shower
shoes. Yes, I love that. Shower shoes. Yes.
Which apparently, and I'm laughing because it's kind of crazy, that ruined Vader's confidence in himself and in everything that he did. He would talk about it years and years and years later about how he wanted that brawl back.
And the other brawl that I've heard about is when Haku told me the story about how he bit the nose off this guy in a bar that said wrestling was fake, and he wouldn't shut up about it, and finally had to put an end to it. And then they left, and then he got an arrest warrant out for him. And the next time he went back to Baltimore, he was he skirted the law, but he actually did get caught finally, and he had to pay a lawyer a lot of money, which he said he will never bite anyone's nose off again after that. But he was really careful not to get in trouble after he did that to that guy. But frankly, if you say that to a pro wrestler and you get your nose bitten off, you sort of deserved it. You're probably being a huge jerk. Anyway, inside brawls inside. Man, there's so many. I mean, it is a standard now in indie wrestling, thanks to mainly ECW, but other things where people just brawl outside through the crowd and stuff. Of course, we had plenty of those in Metro Pro and everything.
Yeah.
I always loved, back in the Attitude Era, I always loved the brawls at the Tim White's bar in Providence, Rhode Island, the Friendly Tap. I enjoyed. I was actually on location for one of those once, and they were pretty damn hilarious because Tim White would. The joke was anytime Tim had like a malfunctioning arcade game or a pinball machine or something in the bar that he needed replaced, like a cooler or something, he would always say, "Hey, come on and how about a brawl at my place?" So like people could destroy it and he could turn it in for a loss. Basically, WWE would pay him for a new one and just for the prop usage. And I always love those at the APA, just beating the hell out of everybody in the Friendly Tap. Did you have one in mind?
The first thing that came to my mind was Roddy Piper and Goldust.
Oh, through the streets of LA. Yeah.
I remember watching that. And again, I was kind of quote unquote smart to the business. A lot of those rounds that I remember watching and going, this is like
he broke his
shoot.
He broke his hand, right? I mean, he broke. Roddy Piper broke something. He broke his fingers, hand, wrist, something actually in that fight, which screwed up because they had taped. I heard Bruce tell that story. They taped the first part where they're driving the car and he jumps on the hood and all that stuff. They had taped all that previous, a couple days before, and that's when he actually hurt himself. So actually for the actual match that they had to act like, because remember it was hilarious looking back on it. It's just such a snapshot of time where they're acting like it's like the O.J. Simpson chase, because the story was they were trying to get O.J. Simpson to come to WrestleMania for an amount of money, and obviously that didn't play out, but they had Piper and Goldust do it, and so he had to sort of hide the fact that he had broken a bone when they went from the taped version straight into the arena. But that was a classic.
And I remember, and it really shed a new light on Goldust. And by the way, if they would have gotten O.J. Simpson to appear at WrestleMania, he would have killed it.
Man, that was sort of bad. This is almost too soon, even though it's been 35 years.
Hey,
but
killed it.
Oh man. Well, I'm never above any kind of O.J. Simpson humor. Believe me, he is an amazing man on social media these days. So
dude, it is one of the best outside of Michael Elgin, one of the best follows ever.
Or don't downplay Instagram Britney Spears, because
Instagram Britney Spears is
if you want to Instagram Britney Spears, if you want to see a person slowly going crazy every day of her life until she's finally something really bad's gonna happen. I don't know what, but it is weird to watch Britney Spears. Now she's in good shape. I'm not watching this for pure any kind
titillation.
of I'm not. It's really Ace Steele and myself do enjoy some Britney Spears songs. I'm not above saying that. So when we were in Vegas,
He wears a Britney Spears shirt sometimes.
He does wear that Britney Spears shirt. Very manly of him to do that. I mean, any guy that can wear a shirt like that has to be tough, because you have to be prepared to get your ass kicked.
I was gonna say, by the way, Ace, this is Chris Goff saying this, not me. I love you. I love your Ace Steel shirt.
So, but me and him always talk about how pissed off we are that we did not see Britney Spears when she had her residency at Planet Hollywood in Vegas, because apparently it was against her will, and her father was making her do it to make some more money when she was still under his control. So we'll never be able to do that now, because she's a complete train wreck and it'll never happen again. So, we will lament those old days and those bad decisions. But yes, there's several people, and they're the people to follow on social media. Yeah.
So yeah, that's why I think it's so fun. I did love the APA brawls. Oh my God. Every time they set up, and it was just like you knew something was going to happen, and you knew somebody would, I mean, those were just so much fun. But the other one that came to mind real quick was Fit Finley versus Steven Regal in the parking lot at Nitro.
Oh God. Well, what is that the one that you got hurt?
Yes.
Okay, man, they had some crazy hardcore matches then. Remember the circle of cars and
that's the one I'm talking about.
Okay, yes, that one was like that hurt many people's careers. Didn't it? It felt like there was multiple injuries in that. And maybe I'm getting two matches sort of convoluted there, but I remember when those matches were happening and these people were getting legit like horrible injuries. It was. You're right. I want to say that the one I'm thinking of also had the Nasty Boys involved in some way, but that might have been another hardcore. They had a lot of different versions of hardcore matches outside there, but
Max Payne and Cactus Jack versus the Nasty Boys is one of the matches I think of with Spring Stampede, and how brutal that was. And the Nasty Boys weren't technically good workers, but boy, they could throw.
I always loved these aren't really brawls, but I always loved the on location stuff, because at Metro Pro we did a match where it was at Falls Count Anywhere, so we had them take it outside, and they had a fall outside on the in the parking lot, and so I always loved it when they did the Al Snow fights when he was a hardcore guy, and they would him and Hardcore Holly went out to the river, and then also when Crash Holly was involved, and they would go to the fun spot, whatever that was, where he went down the slide, and Kyoto was there behind him or whatever, sliding down, doing the counts in the ball pit. I mean, those things are always fun. I don't know. To me, that's what a good fun brawl is. Like when you start getting ridiculous, the brawls that are just like we talk about, just where they go out into the crowd and just constantly just hit each other. Now they're so passe and they're so overdone that they really have no effect on me. Now they have to have some kind of added bonus, like going down into a ball pit.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, side note, Bob Holly, one of the nicest guys I ever met in NWL. Great guy. And my story, and one day I'll tell it on the podcast. Him meeting Bones in St. Joe, Missouri, is one of the funniest stories I ever had part of in the NWL.
Well, you gotta clarify who Bones is to people out there. Bones is a guy who I don't think he's ever been taught how to be a professional wrestler. He has somehow done something in somewhere in his life where he now considers himself to be a professional wrestler, but really should not be anywhere near a ring, and it's ludicrous to anyone that books him or puts him in a match. But he is your sort of your Otis Town Drunk from the Andy Griffith show. He's that guy, but Kansas City's area guy like that, who just let's say when I saw a match that he did, that when we had people booking stupid matches at the TPC, including himself, I would go over there and I would walk into the front door of the NWL Performance Center, and there would be 100 people sitting on one couch, and I'm like, who are all these, hayseeds? And it ended up being Bones's family. So I was like, who's Bones? And Bones ends up being some guy that I thought was cleaning the toilets, but he was actually in the main event of a TPC show. So there's my thought on Bones.
Dude, Bob's reaction when Bob thought I was being a dick, and he was just like, why are you treating that? He's like, and then within 10 minutes of Bones talking to him, I came over to Bob, and Bob was like, had enough. and it was classic. Anyways, I'll tell that story another time. Thank you, Chris, for the interview this week. We will be back next week with some more fun, frivolity, and everything in between, talking about the best of the worst territory in the world. I'm Gabe. That's Chris. We'll see you next time right here. Bye-bye.
It's the worst